Leaders see things differently than the people in their team. Today, we're going to talk about situational awareness. Situational awareness sounds like something that should be pretty obvious, easy to understand. It might be one of those things that you just assume everybody understands. Or maybe it sounds like something just micro-level tactical. Or maybe you think it's something that when you get enough experience, you're just supposed to know what it is or have it. The truth is, it's much more complicated than that. And most leadership failures don't fail because of a lack of knowledge or information, or even that there was a lack of situational awareness. Most leadership failures are because we communicated at different levels of situational awareness, which is what I'm going to talk about and show you in this video, so that you can speak at the same level or get to the level of the people that you're trying to communicate with. Hi, I'm Mike Targus, retired Marine, founder of Center Desk Leadership Coaching. I left the Marine Corps in 2013 and entered a second career in project management, sales, and engineering, and managed those teams still to this day. I started Center Desk Leadership Coaching in this channel to get the topics out there that are a little bit hard to explain in the classroom environment. You need a little bit of practical experience yourself to get them. These are the topics that you don't hear every day, the things that just go unseen, maybe with an incomplete level of understanding. What is situational awareness? Is it understanding? Not quite. Mica Endsley studied this with her colleagues for decades. Human performance in a complex environment. And what they found was that it's not a single attribute or characteristic. Situational awareness is actually layered. And when the layers don't line up between the communicator and the receiver, problems can happen. So what are the three layers of situational awareness? Think of this as a ladder that goes from basic to more complex. First layer is essentially, it's perception. What do I see? Where am I? What are the things that I see changing around me? It's just this plain, raw input. Level 2, or the second level, is where we start to interpret things. We got the inputs coming in, and we're starting to make sense of them. So you see what's going on, and then you can tell that that's normal or it's not normal. Or you see something happening and you recognize it as a problem. And you start to get the feeling that something may be trending in a bad direction, or it could be the opposite. It could be a good direction. But you start to develop that feeling. You start to develop understanding, and that's where the next level comes in. Level 3 is called projection. What is going to happen next? If we don't intervene in what's going on right now, if we continue down this path, or if the situation just keeps unfolding, like it seems like it's going to, these are the judgments that experienced leaders make, or even subject matter experts. Somebody that's got a lot of experience in a certain field or a certain way of leading. This is where you live. Level 3, projection. And this is a good place to be, but it's also where the trouble starts. And the problem is this: leaders almost always communicate from level 3, the level of projection. That's what you're responsible for. And if you've got a decent amount of experience and been working in your job for a while, if you've worked up to the level that you're at, you've been probably operating in projection for a long time now. At this level, you're not just seeing situations in black and white or raw data or raw input. You're automatically thinking about what those inputs are going to turn into over time. You can't help but think of what's going to happen. You have so much experience and your brain is so grooved and conditioned to get through these similar types of situations that you speed right through levels 1 and 2 to get to 3. But as you may have already started thinking, the problem is that the people that you're communicating with, the people that are executing the plans that you're coming up with, they're not at level 3. Maybe you have some that are, but more likely than not, if you're talking to a group, they're going to be on a different level. They're still trying to orient themselves on what you're saying, the problem that you're seeing, the situation you're describing. They're still trying to just basically orient on that, or they're still trying to perceive what you think, what you're telling them. They're making sense of even just the most basic things. And what Endsley found is that this mismatch is usually the default method of communication between leaders and teams, especially across experience levels. And to make matters worse, what they also found was authority, or your title, maybe in the hierarchy of your organization, makes it worse. It's a two-way street here. when a leader is speaking and they sound very confident, and you may have been in this situation, you almost automatically assume that the leader knows what they're talking about. You may disagree with what they're saying, but if a well-prepared communication comes off confidently delivered, you're inclined to believe them. And versely, if you are the one that is in a position to need to clarify what you're hearing, if you've got your bosses speaking, the research shows that people are inclined not to ask as many questions as they probably should. So there's an incomplete understanding from the get-go. And what do people do when there's gaps in their understanding? They fill the gaps with assumptions. Maybe the assumption is right, but a lot of times it is not. So you have to realize that when you're communicating to your team, that the default is going to be one, that they are not going to be at the same level. They're not going to be at the same level of situational awareness and understanding as you are. And they're also going to be inclined not to ask all the questions that you would wish they would ask. There's going to be some uncertainty in there. So let's take a quick pause here, a little thought experiment. Think of one time, maybe in the recent past, where you gave directions to your group. We need to hit pause or something. Now think about, where was the group on levels 1, 2, or 3 when you gave this direction, maybe that you thought was obvious? I would say probably more likely than not, you can, if you're really thinking hard about a situation that actually happened, you were on probably level 3 and they were on even levels 1 or 2. Maybe you saw evidence that they didn't really understand what was going on. Maybe you got frustrated with the result. But if it was in fact a misalignment, that's not incompetence. That's a lack of understanding of what you're trying to convey. It was misalignment. Now let's add stress to the whole thing. What does stress do to levels 1, 2, and 3 of situational awareness? Stress collapses everything down from 3 to 2, from 2 to 1. Another way of thinking about this is, under pressure, people don't project, they simplify. You and I simplify things when we're under pressure. Cognitive load narrows, or our ability to process becomes constricted. Our memory compartmentalizes or fragments, and it's harder to have those complex problem-solving thoughts when you're under pressure. This is something that Gary Klein found with his research in his book, Sources of Power. He talked about recognitional decision-making, spent a lot of time with firefighters, paramedics, and military. And what he found was, just through pure repetition and recognition, was what was needed to overcome the stress of the situations. And that was the only way you could do it, is if you just had that, what he called recognitional decision-making. And even if somebody is an expert in an area, stress can still take them down. And what you and I need to be careful of is, we got to make sure that we are really looking into the reasons that something didn't work. One of the reasons our experts didn't come through under pressure. It's probably more than a simple matter of they don't care. And another thing this research shows is that we as leaders, we can really underestimate how far down stress can collapse somebody's ability to think and achieve situational awareness. To illustrate what I'm talking about here with pressure and perspectives or levels, think about a map and a piece of actual terrain, maybe in the woods. Now, on a map, you can look down at the map, you can orient the map and find out what direction everything is pointed. You can see the roads, the hills, maybe you got streams and lakes even. It really doesn't take that much effort at all to look at a map and understand it once you got the basics. Now imagine somebody that is in the woods on that same piece of terrain that the map indicates. Maybe it's 80, 90 degrees out. Maybe it's nighttime. Maybe the thorn bushes are scratching at their skin as they're trying to walk. Maybe they got to get from this point to that point in a compressed amount of time. These are really two ways of viewing the exact same situation. One is a map and one is actually on the terrain. So that's maybe one way to think of it. As a leader, you're the one looking at the map and you're explaining what's on the map, whereas your people are those people in the forest trying to navigate through in the dark, in the heat, and the stress. It's the same terrain, viewed totally different. Maybe think of that as two different layers in the situational awareness model. A good way to analyze the way you communicate is to think of what the person listening to you probably is thinking in the first 5 seconds after you speak. So think of some direction that you gave, maybe under pressure. Maybe you needed the team to perform at an increased rate or tempo. Maybe there's some important business results that are on the line. Now, think to yourself, what are the people listening to me actually thinking about? Are they thinking about this complex financial situation of the business that I'm trying to communicate that's on my mind? No, they're probably thinking about, how does this affect me right now? What is Mike saying? What is the exact situation he's trying to describe? They're not even coming close to thinking about what the plan is for the future. So when you're speaking like that, you got to make sure, you got to ask yourself, are my words meeting people at the level that they are, or am I still too far up here in projection? Remember, I talked a little bit about how authority or titles in a hierarchy can make this even harder. It's pretty well documented that people are hesitant to ask questions of leaders in organizations, especially if there's a high pressure situation. Regular old town hall meeting, maybe not. But when something is really going down and some of the senior leaders come in and they start talking fast and loud, maybe, the odds of people asking questions in that environment are pretty low. This is something that Klein has found in his research, is that you and I, if we're not really thinking about it, we can perceive our lack of understanding and need to ask a question as a personal failure. Now, chances are the leaders that in that scenario there, or maybe you want people to feel like that. But unless you address that directly, they probably will. Then go back to the map and the forest example there. The leaders that are speaking in that group, maybe it's you reading from the map. Everybody else there is lost in the woods, 2 different levels. So what do we do about this? What do high-performing teams do to bridge that gap and achieve common situational awareness? First of all, they don't assume everybody's got situational awareness. Engineer achieving it. You may have seen or heard this. You may have done this yourself. And you have about 3 or 4 lines or maybe 3 or 4 minutes of instruction on something. And then you look at the people that you just said it to and you say, clear? And nobody says anything, or they nod and you move on. Well, they weren't clear, most likely. So in a high-performing organization, what you're going to see are leaders who know that when they give direction, they need to ask for the recipient to say back what they heard. Okay, tell me what you think you just heard me say. Something just as simple as that. They rehearse things. Okay, let's go through this proposal. You pretend you're the competition. What are you proposing that could challenge our offering? Make sure you're thinking about things from all different directions. Another thing the rehearsal does is it puts people in actual situations where they have to show that they do understand something. The easiest example would be to talk about rehearsing a presentation that somebody's got to give, and they either know it or they don't confidently know it. Okay, you're a construction superintendent, and you've got deliveries coming in at 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 5 o'clock, and you start your day off with the safety brief, and then you talk about what's going to go on. Well, you as a superintendent, you know deliveries, you know logistics of the job site. And unless you really make it a point to communicate and bring your people up to that level of understanding, they're not going to have that same level of situational awareness that you have. They're going to be thinking about doing the task right in front of them unless you make a conscious effort to change that. Then a big thing with leaders, military too, commander's intent, or what is my intention? That has to be explicitly explained and then explained back. It's hard enough just to communicate bare black and white facts. If you want to try to communicate what you're actually thinking and your purpose and your why, you can write that out, but you got to have some two-way to communication to really make sure people understanding what you're trying to get across. None of this happens automatically. You got to work to synchronize it. You got to work to synchronize the 3 levels. So what's the standard for leaders when you're communicating and you're trying to achieve situational awareness? It's not that I understand what I'm communicating. It's, do I understand where my people are that I'm communicating to? And you got to realize that just because you have a title or authority, you can move people around and you can affect them. But what you can't do is make them understand. And if your instructions assume that there's clarity where there's not, you're going to have problems, obviously. Closing, situational awareness isn't just about seeing more. It's not even really about understanding more. It's about seeing the differences in where people are in the team and the organization. And enough of an external focus as a leader to realize that there's different perceptions, that people are loaded down, stressed out differently. And they're at different starting points. You probably have people that have just joined the team, and you have people that have been there for 3, 4, 5, 10 years. So if you want to take your leadership game to the next level, don't ask, was I clear? Ask yourself, was I clear from where they're standing and from their point of view? If you can make that one shift, it's really going to change your leadership overnight. That's it. If this video was good for you, consider liking and subscribing, following along. Thanks.